You know, America is going through a real polarization. There's divisiveness, there's randomness, unpredictability. There's a whole sense of malaise, psychic malaise, if you will. And one exception to this broad rule that I think most of you can agree with is Arlington, Nebraska was recently named by BusinessWeek magazine as the second best place, listen to this, in America to raise a child. Second best place in America to raise a child by BusinessWeek magazine. It's a place that bears looking closely at, and particularly the culture, the spiritual dimension, the religious dimension. That's why I'm visiting with two pastors right here from Arlington, Nebraska. First one is Pastor Rick Kanoy with St. Paul's Lutheran Church and Pastor John Hogue with Arlington Community Church. Please welcome these ministers right here. Thank you for coming, John. Pastor Rick, thank you so much. You know, this is obviously, we're talking a little bit here about economic development and business and parenting, volunteerism, a lot of different dimensions. But I think the spiritual and the religious dimension actually has some real bearing on this award. Pastor Rick, tell me, what is it your church and the whole spiritual dimension of life have to do with a great community for a family to grow up in?
Well, you've heard the expression that it takes a village to raise a child, and Arlington is a village.
Is a village.
Right, and
truly.
The churches are certainly part of that impact. And our job is not only to raise up youth, but also to equip parents for the process of the parenting task, to partner with them.
Yeah, it seems like parenting has never been harder, frankly.
Incredibly difficult.
Yeah, the impact of technology, the impact of media, even children in Arlington are obviously affected by that.
Without question, without question.
Pastor John Hogue, what should somebody, if they come to this community, they've got a family, they might be thinking about actually moving to Arlington, maybe their children feel disaffected or separated from any kind of divine influence or whatever, what would they see, and what would be the real true picture of Arlington looking through the community from a spiritual lens or point of view?
Well, I believe it would be twofold. One would be the ethics and the values of our community to correlate with everyone, regardless of where the walk of journey of faith is. And also trust, that trust attribute that binds us all together.
Right, it becomes the kind of the grease, if you will, that makes relationships, makes things happen because we trust each other. That's fascinating. Well, what could a parent who aspires to have a more successful family life and have their children do well, mature appropriately and so on, and do well, why would they come to perhaps your church or any church here in this community and participate and interact? What concrete things would happen to that family that maybe weren't happening before in their urban environment or whatever?
I think for our church, and probably for Pastor Hogue's as well, that we try to equip parents for that task. We preach and we teach biblical values and morals, and certainly I think the children are going to catch more than they by observing the examples of the lives that their parents live. They're going to do what the parents do, not what the parents say. So we try to equip the parents to be able to lead by example the children that God has blessed them with.
You know, it's interesting, we have business people obviously here in this small community, and they're looking for employees. We're coming back to your trust community, comment earlier, and what does it have to do if they find out that this young person came out of this family and that family went to a church or whatever? What are the natural assumptions they make about that child that may enhance their career and move on as they grow up to be an adult?
Accountability. Responsibility, and with my colleague Pastor Kanoy, reinforcing those values, and that built the concrete and the nucleus, so to speak.
Yeah, outstanding. And you know, it's interesting when you communicate with people that you get a sense of their background in that regard, and so you feel like then you can open up a little bit with them, you know, and so it kind of makes the communication, particularly between generations. Let's talk about that for a second. I'm sure you've seen the challenge that we all have. You have a 60 or 70-year-old baby boomer or whatever, and they're trying to communicate with a distracted smartphone holding a 21-year-old. How can we close that gap? What can we do here in Arlington, Nebraska to make that a more easing kind of a relationship?
I think to try to really focus on relationships and do intergenerational types of activities.
Yeah.
Within our church we have folks that are just a few days old up to 106, and we do the best that we can to mix the generations and to allow them both to teach and to learn one from another.
Just by placing them in physical proximity helps a lot.
Certainly it does.
You know, like what, dinners and buffets and charity activities, that kind of thing?
Absolutely, you bet.
Yeah, and letting people who may not always be leaders in the business world or whatever, but in the church level, they can lead a committee,
Sure.
right? And they can kind of rise up and assume their highest self, huh?
And we'll take children to nursing homes and not to people's homes to carol and to deliver goodie baskets, particularly at this time of the year, but just trying to foster those relationships.
Right. You know, these kinds of charming gestures, I'm sure there are cynical people out there and they'll say, well, that's very quaint, but you know, what does that really have to do with life? But I think there are a lot of people here in a community like this that are saying to themselves, wow, that's really what life maybe is about, right? Why don't you elaborate on that for just a second? Because that really that spirit, that concept of spirit flowing through us in our mundane activities and being shared with other people.
Well, I moved here about 3.5 years ago, and one of the things that it's still consistent to this day is the commitment, regardless of anybody in the walk of faith or journey, the spirit of working together with the different organizations in town, Lion, any group, we help each other. And we uplift each other, and I think it's a sense of empowerment. And we help each other, and we foster that, and making a future leader for tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, another thing that's very interesting is, you know, people lack resources. The middle class has been shrinking now for over 20 years. And there's a lot of people that have cascaded into the lower middle class, or they struggle. Scarcity is a part of their life. But when you come into a Christian environment or a faith-based environment, somehow it seems like that dimension doesn't matter so much. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's probably there's a sense there that's very attractive in terms of getting into that environment.
It goes back to the biblical values, and certainly Christ would call us to minister to all walks of life. He says, whatever you do for the least of these brothers, you do for me. And we certainly try to promote that within our congregation, to share the blessings that you've been given with others. And this is a very sharing community, a community that cares deeply about one another. Many people have been here for many generations, but many people like Pastor Hogue and myself have been here relatively brief periods of time, but we've been welcomed and accepted and made allowed to be a part of this community, a vital part of this community.
Yeah, and you are playing a vital contribution. Thank you so much, Pastor Rick Kanoy and Pastor John Hogue. You're bringing a spiritual dimension, a transpersonal dimension, a service and a duty dimension, and it's absolutely critical for people who are looking for a new way to get their lives going again right here in Arlington, Nebraska. Thank you so much, Pastor John Hogue, Pastor Rick Kanoy. Beautiful. We'll be right back here on WOWBIZ TV. I'm Lynn Hinderaker. Thanks so much for watching.